Okay, we're going to be summarizing now the din of Naamanut Yisrael, which we were learning the past few weeks in the afternoons. You had the two big booklets on the topic, and that's what we're going to be just going through a quick summary. I'm not giving any big chidushim, and what comes out of what we learned. The main sources are Siman Kuf Yutes, the beginning of Hilchos Shchita, and what I pointed out to you what the Alter Rebbe says in Hilchos Shchita and other places regarding Naamanus. Shulchan Aruch says someone who's chashud, there's a chashad on him that he eats himself dvarim asurim, things which are asur, whether it's asur midiraisa or asur midivrei seifrim, you can't rely on him. The Nosei Kelim right away says what does it mean you can't rely on him, you can't buy from him, and unless you can't buy from anything that he's chashud on it. That is the Shulchan Aruch. The Mashmos of the Alter Rebbe is like the Rambam. It's not enough that he's not chashud. Also has to be that he has a special cheskas kashrus, muchzak bekashrus. What does muchzak bekashrus mean? The Alter Rebbe brings you he brings the lashon of the Beis Yosef that everybody knows. Yoidim umakirim shu adam kosher. He's known to have a specific cheskas kashrus. And then he has that cheskas kashrus that is enough that you could rely on him to buy from him things. That the guy, just because he's not chosher, just because he's not innocent until proven guilty, rather he has to be able to prove his that he has a cheskas kashrus before you could buy anything from him. And this is especially if a person doesn't buy from one specific, or Shochat, the Alter Rebbe talks about, doesn't buy from one specific person, buys from a bunch of people and sells. In such a scenario, you definitely have to have this specific special cheskas kashrus. One of the examples of somebody who loses a cheskas kashrus that the Alter Rebbe brings, a very common example in those days, was somebody who was masig Shochat, who was masig gvul. He went to a place where it's not his job to be shaychet. Then there were shachtim for town, and they had a salary from the town. He went there as masik gvul. So even though all his shchitas are be'etzem kosher, there's no chashad on him that he's meichel nevelas atrefes. The fact that he went in such a thing made him lose his special cheskas kashrus, and therefore he's no longer trusted blankly for that. Now, if a person is not chashud for selling treif, he's only chashud for eating treif, then you can't eat in his house, obviously, but you could buy from him. What's the definition of a chashad? The Shulchan Aruch right away tells you it says if somebody is nechshad on one specific thing, he's only chashud for that specific thing, you can't buy from that specific thing. And for example, if someone's nechshad on chaylev, then you can't buy from him any kind of fat, because you don't know if it's chaylev or not. But you could buy something else. That's food. If he brings people to buy food from him, he has incentives to get people to come to the store, and you make a knas to eliminate his incentives also. So that way he's not going to bring people to buy from him. Now, what does it mean that he's not nechshad? That if he's chashud on one thing is not a problem for other things. Alter Rebbe right away tells you in Hilchos Shchita, Kontesachren, that it means lahoid. Two places in Kontesachren, two places Alter Rebbe mentions it, that the loy nechshad on other things only lahoid to say that something is to be made, but or testify something is fine. But if there's any reason why he would have to do extra work, yitrach, he's going to have more tircha, which is a concept that's going to come across. If this person who is not trusted for something is now going to have to do something which needs more work on his part to make it kosher, he's not trusted even on something else. That no, lei nechsha is only the hoid, but when it comes to something, he doesn't have a blanket lack of chashad on anything else. Why? For a simple reason. being that we know that he has kalus das, and he's not so serious about it, we don't trust him that he's going to put the time and effort to do the thing properly. The example of the Rebbe is talking about, the Shuchat is talking about checking the knife. He's going to check the knife quickly, and he's going to say, okay, whatever, it's good. He's not going to actually go slowly the way he's supposed to. So he's not trusted on that. Now, that is when it comes to, it means when he's a nechshad on one thing, could he be trusted for something else on which he was not nechshad? So even then, if it's something else which has more work involved, or something which entails that he's going to have to work harder or go further, he's still not trusted. Doesn't have that trust anymore. If somebody is nechshad, somebody is nechshad on something which is a chomor, a serious aveda, he is also nechshad on something which is a lighter in the same category, has a smaller punishment. Why? Because you look at a person, if he doesn't care about the big punishment, why should he care about the small punishment? If he's nechshad on something which is isur is kares, the marshal, and then it comes to food, and then he's something else which is isur is malchus, and we say, if he doesn't care about the serious one, if he doesn't care about the smaller one, unless it is something which everybody's machmir on. If it's something what you know that everybody is nizhar on this serious thing, it's across the board that nobody touches it, but on the lighter thing people are not so strict, so the fact that he's nechshad on the davar chamor doesn't make him nechshad on the davar akam. Only when the davar chamor is not something which is just he doesn't care about the punishment, so you see he doesn't care about the other punishment either. Now, if it's something where the minig is it's not a minig al pitayre, but the common custom among the people in town is to be makel in it, because they don't feel it's a isser for whatever reason it is, he is not considered. Doesn't make him into a nechshad on other things, even though it's a serious isur, and there could be a lighter isur. The fact that this serious thing, nobody or a lot of people are not makbid on it, that removes that. The fact that a lot of people don't do it is enough of a reason that you can't trust him for that specific thing. For obviously you can't trust him when he's not makbid, but it doesn't mean that on something which is less of a isur, he is not trusted anymore. Now, if a person, the Alter Rebbe mentions, if a person does an aveda one time, even a serious aveda, and a very serious aveda, but the reason is, or serious infraction and kashrus, but the reason why he's doing it, we say he only did it one time, we say Yitzri Tokfoi. Yitzhahara took control of him, he didn't think about what he was doing, and therefore he doesn't become nechshad on lighter things, if it only happens once. But on that specific thing, obviously he's no longer trusted. Because for the same reason, the moment you botch up on one thing, you're not trusted on that thing anymore until it gets fixed. What's the example? If somebody sells dvarim asurim, the first thing the local chachamim put a nidr on him, they remove him from his position, and he has to go somewhere else and prove himself in other aspects of Judaism, and then by doing tshuva, and that shows, then he could be maybe brought back into his role. But that is if he sold dvarim asurim without, maybe it was we don't know if it's shaykh or meis, he sold dvarim asurim. What happens if somebody sells treifa meat and we know, based on his actions, that the reason he's doing it is because he has an intention to be machshel others. He's not because of, we know that he has a specific intention. The way he's doing it is because he wants to be machshel other people. Then you get rid of him. And it's very hard to bring such a person back to have the same chazakah that he had before. If he did it b'shoigig, it's not enough to just say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. he still has to do tshuva, like we said before, get removed from his post. No. It's machshel other people. We're going to move to the next thing. Machshel other people b'kavan is one thing. Move to the next thing. B'shoigig, it's all Shulchan Aruch. It's not enough that he says, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That's not enough to fix and to go back to being no longer nechshad on it. Still has to do tshuva. If somebody made a mistake because of a lack of knowledge, let him go learn. That's not enough of a reason to say that he is not nechshad. You're nechshad, but you made a mistake, you didn't know, go learn, and you finish learning, come and we'll discuss it again. The Alter Rebbe points out something interesting. These things apply only when there is no issue of chimud mamoin. When there is a financial incentive involved. When there is a financial incentive involved, a shoigig could be at times considered like a mezid, that he would have to do a more serious tshuva. It's kuntasachin also in Simon Beis. That means the fact that a person is going to tell you that he was a shoigig is not enough to treat him as a person as a shoigig, because there's a financial incentive, chimud moment, he is making more money off the deal, and therefore the moment money gets involved, the trustworthiness of a person is harder to repair, and we consider him almost like a mezid. All this is about nechshad. Right? We discussed that this is all based on Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch goes based on nechshad. Alter Rebbe says he needs a special cheskas kashus, and we said what the cheskas kashus is. What happens if somebody made a mistake once? He was shoigig, he made a mistake once, so yes, he has to be removed from his post until he does tshuva, etc. So according to Shulchan Aruch, it's simple. He's not nechshad. He's no longer, we remove the chashad from him. When he loses tshuva, he'll be back. According to the Alter Rebbe, what's going to be there? What's going to be, does he lose his cheskas kashrus or not? That's what Tzemach Tzedek mentions, that he does not lose his special cheskas kashrus because he made one mistake, even if it's a little bit of a pshiyah, k'tzas pshiyah, and a sheichet which was not so careful, he still did not lose completely his special cheskas kashrus. What kind of things, if somebody did something, the Tzemach Tzedek has different tshuva, if somebody did something which is asur, but the isur is only mishum maris ayin, it's not a general isur, it's not something which is asur medina, it's asur only mishum maris ayin, so then tshuva does help, he does tshuva and he goes back to his role, he doesn't have to leave town and remove him from his role and everything. So what happens when you have somebody who is chashud? Or according to the Alter Rebbe, if he doesn't have a specific cheskas kashrus that you need to buy from him. How could you buy something from him? So only if he tells you that he bought it from mumche ploini, from a specific person that is trusted. Because then you're not choishesh that he's going to lie to you, because you could check up on him. The mumche is here, you ask the mumche, did you sell to this guy? Then you could rely on it. That is in general the dinim of chashud. These are all people who are frum, who are nechshad on a specific thing, and they're not trusted in that specific thing. When could you fix it? When you go back on it? When not? You could fix it or not. Now we're going to move to that was the first part of the topic. We're going to move to the next topic, which is mumur. A mumur has different categories. You have a person, if somebody's a mumur l'teyavan, we said that somebody who does something because he enjoys it. But if kosher would be available for the same quality, same price, same easy to get to, he would go with the kosher. So also he is only not trusted for that specific thing that he is a mumur on. When is he trusted? When it's a very small tirche, and he's going to be scared if they ask him where it comes from. Alter Rebbe brings the example of a shochet. He says the specific person checked the knives for me. So over there, if you know that the mumche it's a short walk to the mumche, or that it's not so much work, he's trusted. The definition of lateyavim, which we said that he does it for because he enjoys it, not because he wants to go against the Eibishter. Alter Rebbe describes in Hilchos Niskei Guf, he has a definition. He says somebody who does it when Yitzrei Takfoi. He doesn't do it always. It's not something which he does on a regular basis. So he has a lateyavim, he's a mumer. He does it whenever he has when there's no kosher meat. He goes and buys treifa meat. But somebody who always does it, even if you're only doing it lateyavin without any intentional hachis, is not considered anymore a mumur lateyavin. The fact that you do this on a let's say even if there will be kosher meat, lateyavin, he decided that treifa is better, he'll buy the treifa one. That in such a scenario, he is not. We don't say yitzrei takfoi. He made an intentional determination that he's going to violate this mitzvah, and he no longer falls to the category of mumur lateyavin. Now, when is this mumur lateyavin? We said that sometimes he is trusted when it's a small amount of work, and he's scared if they're going to ask him. It's also only when the kosher and the treif are always the same price, are always, the kosher is always available at a cheap price, and that day was also available for a cheap price. Otherwise, he is again not trusted. And lechatchila, he's only trusted if he has a oimed al gab of the whole time, somebody who is trusted, who's checking before beginning and end. That's the mumur lateyavin. The mumur lahachis, even mumur lahachis on one thing, even if he only did it one time lahachis, he's considered like a guy and he has zero nemanos on that specific thing. On mumur lahachis on everything. One aveda, he does mumur lahachis on one thing, one time lahachis. Alter Rebbe adds one time in Niskei Guf, and in Hilchos Mitzvot Pikadon, he's considered a mumur lahachis, and he's not trusted for anything. He's dinei kem goy. A goy is not trusted for anything. Mumur t'avodah zareh, also, even if it's only one time, b'mezid, in hiding, he is considered like a goy, and he has no nemanos. And it doesn't have to be lahachis. It could be even lateyavin. As long as it's b'mezid, avodah zareh, then even if it's b'tzineh, it's already lose all your nemanos, you become like a goy. Chil Shabbos, also one time, b'mezid is enough to make a person into a category of a goy. However, over there has to be farhesya. What does the farhesya mean? Alter Rebbe explains it's to be in front of 10 people, or that it's known, or that he knows it's going to become known. Once he knows it's going to become known, it's already, or it's famous, he falls into that category, even if he only did it once. Alter Rebbe adds, even if it's something which he did, not midaraisa, just shtickle still it was not cheshchita, but over there it's even something which is midrabanan. But something which is rabbanon only if he does it on a regular basis, not again, because we went before, if somebody does only one time something, we don't all the way knock him out. But if it's b'mezid and something which is going to do, which he does on a common basis, and even a small amount of times already makes him a mumur for Chil Shabbos, and therefore he is no longer trusted. And mumur l'chol ha'torah. Now the Rebbe says in Kutasach Rubik Kolel, this doesn't have to be all the 613, but even if it's just the majority of them, it's also, even if it's only lateyavin, he's not neman on anything, he's also like a goy. What happens if somebody who doesn't believe in Torah Shebal Peh but does believe in Torah Shebichsav? So on things which are written in Torah Shebichsav, like Shchita, he's trusted. As long as there's somebody who's Eimed al Gabav, so Alter Rebbe writes down in Kuntas Achron. And the Shchita, for example, someone's Eimed al Gabav, Chatchila, it's fine. There are certain things which the Gemara Chachamim defined as somebody who does them is not Pekaitis. Little things. The world looks at it as a little thing. Mevazat Talmud Chacham is one of those things, and it's considered Apikaitis. Alter Rebbe says they are still trusted. Why? Because in their eyes, it's a small thing and stam chutzpah. And therefore, just because they violated this one, they are not considered nechshad on everything else. That is when it comes to a mumar. So we have a chashud on a specific thing, but from you, the mumar. Now move to Tinek Shenishba. Tinek Shenishba is mentioned in Alter Rebbe. The definition of it is mentioned really only in one place, in Hilchis. I only saw it in Hilchis Ribis. Clearly written over there. Hilchis Ribis is a discussion which person becomes like a goy that you could lend him money with interest. So in Seif Ayin Tes, the Alter Rebbe over there says that if you have a mumeres which got married to a goy and had a child, so this child is the son of a Jewish mother, this is a Tinek Shenishba. And the Alter Rebbe says, Ve'enoi doime l'mumar is not compared to a mumar. Why? Because a mumar, a mumar knows the Eibishter and has the intention, goes in intention to go against the Eibishter. But this one doesn't know. You're going to say, afterwards he found out that he's a Yid. And after he found out that he's a Yid, he went and he saw how the Yidden behave. So he had an option of learning. Still, he's nidin like an onus. He's onus, he's considered an Shnishba, and because he grew up surrounded by the Goyim on their religion. Then Alter Rebbe discusses the din of Karoim, which also, they don't believe in Torah Shebal Peh. It's also, Alter Rebbe brings two opinions about Karoim, whether they are considered like Tinek Shenishba, that just because their parents educated them wrong or not. But what Alter Rebbe says about this Tinek Shenishba, the son of a Mumeres and a Goy, that just because the fact that he grew up around Goyim, even though afterwards he found out he's a Yidden, he went around Yidden, he's still considered the Anus. That happens to be a quote from the Darkei Moshe regarding Koroim. Right, so these are pretty much the categories of Yidden when it comes to if they could be trusted on certain things. So where does this leave us? On the practical level. Today, you can still find mumarim, lahachis, l'teyoven, or if they have a desire, it's hard to find. Machal Shabbos is a little easier to find. Still, the majority of Yidden that you're going to encounter on Machal Shabbos are not going to be from the mumar type. They're going to be from the Tinek Shenishba type. Now that Tinek Shenishba Alter Rebbe discusses that they grew up among Goyim, but more similar to those who grew up among the Koroim, according to one shitta that Alter Rebbe brings. The first shitta, one of the shittas that they are considered kosher. What does kosher mean? The kosher Yidden obviously doesn't mean that they could be trusted on the thing that they are violating. But if it's, because when we mentioned before, we say that a mumar l'chil Shabbos is kegoyin, has zero nemanus and everything else. Mashenkin, if it's a different aveda, he's only mumar, he's only not trusted for that specific thing. So if you have a Yid who's a Mechal Shabbos today, his Geder is a Tinek Shenishba, like most of them are. And Shabbos, he's not up to keeping Shabbos. You're like out of him, go through some of the things he is, but he is makpid fully in the kosher kitchen. He has two separate kitchens. he only buys meat from you, you know, all the meat in his house or in the store, everything. If the only issue is because of chashad, then you don't have he's no longer, since he's not a mumar of the Chilul Shabbos, because he's not a mumar, he's in Tinuk Nishba, so he's not anymore in the category of somebody who loses completely his nemanos. Some nemanos he has on kashas. Obviously, it doesn't work according to Mashmos Al-Tereh, but needs a special cheskas kashas for Yadua v'kosher v'neman. But according to Shulchan Aruch, it would be enough to be able to buy from him. Now, but there are other things. If someone is nechshad on one thing, you can't trust him on that specific category. If someone is not nechshad on something, is nechshad on something else, something which is more chametz, something which is more kal, could you trust, could you not trust? Today, you don't buy anything essentially without a hechsher, unless you go to a butcher store, then you have to rely on a lot of times you have to rely on the owners to a certain degree, because the chickens come without a label on them. Usually going with hechsherim. So when you deal with hechsherim, you have to see which ones, what each one is. If you have a hechsher which you know is makpid on something, you could rely on them. They have a special cheskas kashus. Now, just because the Rav HaMachshir is known to be, has a special cheskas kasha, is known to be a Adam, Yirei Shamayim, and all the definitions that the Alter Rebbe brings in Kunter Sachar, including that his behavior and everything else, doesn't mean that it filters down all the way to the lower levels of the Ashgach. The Mashgichim, Lavdafke, have the same cheskas kashus. They might not be nechshad because you just don't know who they are. So how could you be chosh on somebody you don't know who he is? You have no way of knowing if he's nechshad or not. He's a suffix, no, but it doesn't have a specific cheskas kashus. So when you have somebody who has a cheskas kashus who's oimed al gabav, you have a proper control of what's happening, and you know this hechsher has a proper control system that you know from the beginning, from the person who you do trust, he has a tight control on the people under him, so then you could trust him for the things that he's makpid on. If he's not makpid on something, in one category, you can't trust him on the same category. If a hechsher is not makpid, for example, what are the examples that are brought in Shulchan Aruch? It's wine, fish, meat, milk, right? The 4 examples pretty much brought in the Rambam brings the 4 examples. So if you have a hechsher that you know is not so makpid on fish the way they should be makpid, and they found ways to circumvent the Shulchan Aruch, whether it is because they don't properly check they don't have somebody checking the skin. That's before you learn Hilchas Melicha, there's about the halachas of fish, and they have there about which fish you could catch without checking. Fish, you have to see the skin, etc. If a hechsher is known to not have standards when it comes to that department of fish, you can't trust them even when a fish which they do check. Because being that they have a kalus das on that specific topic in one aspect, what's going to make you think that they're going to be strict when they have to be strict, even according to their own opinions, their own standards? Their own standards are that certain fish you could rely on the chazakas, because fish go in families. That's what, especially during Corona, they relied on it, and I think some achsherim just by Yad Kitov, they realized that during Corona they got away with it, they could continue after Corona also. And you don't have to. They rely on chazakas. What's a chazak? A chazaka is that you have 10,000 fish of one kind going in the same direction, l'cha'ira, no other fish is going to join the family. It's a chazaka. You also have the other side of the chazaka. The fish are probably scared of the hechsher, they're not going to join the path that's going under this hechsher. But Shulchan Aruch doesn't rely on this chazak, what are you going to do? So you can't trust such a hechsher. You have to know why. It's a simple Shulchan Aruch. If he's nechsher on this specific thing, you can't trust him on the same category. Same thing is going to apply to milk. And then milk is even more, because milk is something which they consider mutter. If it's something which is yitzrei ansoi, so you're going to say he knows it's wrong, maybe he'll do tshuva. Something which he decided is mutter, Shulchan Aruch says it's aser, you have a problem. Because when he's going to do something which is kosher, you have a problem with that. You're not going to be trusted. If a hechsher gives a hechsher on chalav akum, or chalav treifa, today's usually the same thing, then, in a lot of places, then lav dafki you could rely on them for chalav Yisrael. What are you making faces? Huh? They don't do chalav akum. I'm not discussing specific hechsherim. I'm not discussing specific hechsherim. I'm on camera, I can't discuss specific hechsherim.
Why do you consider hechsher as a company? Why do you consider the individual mashgiach?
Mashgiach is answerable to the company, does whatever they're answerable to the hechsher, and the hechsher does whatever the Amid al-Gav tells him to do or tells him not to do.
All the chalav Yisrael things go through a specific mashgiach. So he's not.
Goes, but why he's not Naaman?
He is
not.
Naaman. That specific mashgiach, he's
no, because if it's going to be an issue with kashering, he's going to call the headquarters and they're going to tell him, okay, chalav akum is anyways, we hold it's mutter. Just take a bottle like I saw b'einay ra'isi kashering a specific place under a good hechsher, well, one of the big hechsherim. They took a bottle of dish soap and sprayed on the inside of the pot and then hosed it with hot water. It's pogum, shine. Dish soap is roi lachila, not only lachila skelev, lachila bnei adam also. If you're over a certain age, you got dish soap in your mouth. Still, it doesn't work. Like why? Because they don't care.
Why does it say why does the associate, you want to call that chazaka, that they have a policy and they stick to their policy in everything?
Because they lost their nemanis. If he's nechshad on one thing, he's not trusted on the same category elsewhere.
No, say he's never to follow his policies.
He's neman to follow his policies, and the policies were made by him, and he decides when to bend his policies for his thing, because it's chimud mammon, not the chimud mammon that Alter Rebbe mentions. Chimud mammon is even stricter, much stronger than that. So you have chimud mammon, and you're not trusting on something. What are you going to do? You have meat, you have the same thing. Wines, if they rely on certain things that you don't rely on, you also have a problem. You can't rely on them. And this is all before you get into the Alter Rebbe and the Cheskes Kashrus Miyuchedes. It's only according to Shulchan Aruch. The basic Shulchan Aruch, lo yichashad, according to the Ravid. Whereas Pasha Nechshad, not only Nechshad, you see B'Poel that he's doing it. You see the Hechsher on something which is, according to Shulchan Aruch, is not kosher. Nechshad is when you have a chashad that he's going to eat it himself, he's going to sell it. Or you're going to have a chashash, you see it. Could be tzemumar with the oven. I don't know if lahachas. Because they do it b'mezid. They know it's wrong. They found a reason why to convince them of this one. But according to the Alter Rebbe, where it's mashma that you need a special cheskas kashrus, like I said before, you have to know, either you have to know who the mashgiach is, and the mashgiach is going to put his foot down and do what has to be done, regardless of who is the person on top of him. Or that the Hashgacha has tough standards, and that the tough standards filter down all the way to the Mashgichim also. Because there are Hechsherim which have good standards on paper, but they don't have good enforcement. Not b'mezid. Nobody's a mumar lahachas. It's all either with the oven or b'shoigig, or because they don't know all the categories that were mentioned. Either yitzrei ansoi, chimud momen. Huh? הרב לא עוקב אחריהם.
אז הבעיה שלו?
נכון, אז אין.
הוא יכול להיות כאילו, הוא כאשר וכולם לא.
לא, האם הוא, אז זה מוריד לו את החזקת קשר שלו. Yeah. So yeah, so you have, with this Rav, if you rely on him, so you go up to Shemayim, and you got a Shoigig, you ate, you relied on him. So, you're still going to have to be judged on that one, so you want to think about twice before doing that. So you want to trust somebody on something that he could be trusted on. When you have an owner of a place Yeah, so that's what we're talking about Echsherim. So let's finish that, move on to the next step. Now we have owner of a place. If you have an owner of a place who has the Cheskes Kashrus, he's known to be a Frum Yid, and he's known that he's not Michael Trefus or anything like that. He has a good record, and you could rely on him. You could eat in his place. If he doesn't have a specific Cheskes Kashrus, you have a problem. You have to have, you definitely have to have some sort of control in it. If the person is not Frum, you have a much bigger problem. Because he doesn't have Naamanus for that specific thing. Unless you're going to say it's a Tinnik Shenishba who you know that he's Makpid on Kashrus, in which case, according to Shulchan Aruch, he will be fine. According to Shulchan Aruch, the way we understand what Tinnik Shenishba is according to the Alter Rebbe, then he will be fine. A hechsher is no. So now, if you have a hechsher, and you have an owner who's not up to par, so they have to have a mashgiach there. You have to have a mashgiach to make sure on all the problems that might occur. If a person is a mummer, it's worse. In a certain degree, a person who's mummer might sometimes be worse than the guy. The guy doesn't have an incentive to be machshel others.
He doesn't know. But he doesn't know him.
Right. Well, a Yid has an incentive to be machshel. A Yid who's lahach has an incentive to be machshel. But I'm not going to get into that. So if you just have to make sure that there's a proper, either the person has the Cheskes Kashrus, the special Cheskes Kashrus, that the Alter Rebbe defines as what's supposed to be the Cheskes Kashrus, or there's the Oimid al Gabel who has the Cheskes Kashrus, there's a Mashgiach, who you could rely on him. Same thing will apply. What? Tinnik Shenishba, he doesn't keep on Kashrus, but he is Shemesh Shabbos?
Yeah.
So it's the problem. The only issue with Shemesh Shabbos is that if you're Dover Echad for Shabbos, you become a Kigoy L'chol for everything else. If someone's Shemesh Shabbos and Shemesh is more for everything except for Shabbos and then Avodah Zareh, he's Osher Mitzad Rubi Gikul. But if he's not Neman and Kashrus, what Neman is he in on Shabbos? On Shabbos you don't have the issue of Nemanus. What are you going to do? You can't eat at somebody's house who's Shemesh Shabbos but eats treif. It's not going to help you anything. Farket, that's the question. If it's a Tinnik Shenishba, the way you understand from Alter Rebbe, you could say that he's not going to fall into the category of a mummer for everything, that we make him like a mummer for everything, even though it's only for Chilul Shabbos. But that's only if you go into that, to be medayik, and now that in Alter Rebbe, and connect to Shulchan Aruch, and I'm not comfortable saying that as a psak, but rather as a svara. No, but you have to know. Why do you have to know this? Because if you're going to be in a specific situation, you're going to go eating in places, or you're going to be outside of New York and you're going to be eating in places, and go on shlichus, you have to know who you're eating by and you have to categorize the person before being able to rely on them. The fact that you have to know who you're relying on, and remember that according to Alter Rebbe, you need a special Cheskes Kashrus to buy from somebody. To buy from somebody is not enough, just the fact that he's not nechshad. Seems like the Alter Rebbe follows in the Rambam that you have to have a special Cheskes Kashrus. To buy from somebody is the same thing as the hechsher of somebody, because you're relying on that person. When the Shulchan Aruch talks about buying from somebody, it means the guy's a store owner, and he has a financial incentive and everything else. Today, that role becomes the kashrus agency. The kashrus agency is the one that you're relying on. Is the one that has the financial incentive also. So you have to make sure who you're relying on. And once you know who the kashrus agency is, and you know if the Rav is known to be has a special cheskes kashrus, you have to make sure that filters down all the way down to throughout all the levels. And then you also have to think about the other aspect which I mentioned, which is if it's nechshad on one thing, then you have to have a different level of supervision. Maybe taka mashgiach, the mashgiach knows what he's doing, and he's is a hechsher which gives on chalav akum, but it also gives on chalav Yisrael. The mashgiach on chalav Yisrael is a person you could trust that he's not going to cut corners, even though the hechsher on top of him thinks that chalav akum is be'etzim kosher, and therefore they don't look at it like we look at it, that it's completely treif, that you have to kasher kelim at 212 the same way as if you put camel milk into the machine. Same exact thing. If you put chalav akum into the machine, you also have to kasher the same exact way. There's no difference between pouring it's pig soup down the machine or pouring chalav akum down the machine. For us, we have to kasher the same way. While other people not. For them, it's a chumrah. So you have to be careful. You really have to. If the mashgiach is there and you could rely on him, then good. But to rely on the main people, if for them that is considered not the isser, then it's a problem. Because for you it is considered the isser. Now, if you have something which is for you as a chumrah, not talking about chalav akum, something is for you as a chumrah, and for somebody else, the chumrah is not in the family. You can't rely on him. He's a kosher yid. He might have a full cheskas kashrus, and you could a special cheskas kashrus that you could eat from him a bunch of other things. But this thing you can't, because on this he's not going your standards. How are you going to rely on him?
What if does the person have
Then he has, but what happens in such a scenario? A person does have that chazakah. When it's a chumrah, a person has a cheskas kashrus, you could trust him when he tells you, I did it according to your standards, if he knows what your standards are. Then you could trust him. If he's not nechshad on something which is asur, he's only nechshad, not nechshad, he just doesn't have the same family chumras as you, you could rely on him when he has a full ne'emanus, he has the same ne'emanus, the cheskas kashrus, you could rely on him when he tells you, this I made without this product that you don't eat. That's fine. But not when it's something which is a problem, according to halacha. So that is in short the summary of this topic of ne'emanus. Ne'emanus of a yid. Ne'emanus of a goy we didn't touch upon so much because everything that applies to a mumar lahachis applies to a yid, to a goy, and the same didn't apply over there also. Pretty much. Because bishul akum and yain nesach and everything else goes the same way. So how do you solve the problem? What can you do? You have to have Eimid al Gabov, you have to have a Shmirah. As we're going to discuss, it's come a time we're going to discuss what's considered a proper Shmirah, the locks, what locks do you have to have, how to do it, what's considered a double lock, what's considered as a din of a camera. Sometimes a camera could be better than somebody who doesn't have such a good eyesight. At least there's more mirtas by camera sometimes than there is. When it's big things, there's mirtas by camera. The small things, you can't see a small thing in the camera. Depends on, actually, today you could see everything. If you have the right cameras, you could see everything today. You could zoom in the cameras and see what a person's holding in his hand. But we'll get to it at a different time. That's the end of this topic. The topic that you're studying now is now going into it's not nothing to do with ne'emanus, but it also has to do with kashrus, agencies. We'll get to that next time, next year. Either in 2 days from today, maybe in not Wednesday. Either we'll do it this week or we'll do it after Shavuos.